The revolt of Gladiator Spartacus, known as the Third Civil War, is the last and most successful slave revolt that Rome suppressed. Why is it a success, you ask? Well, it's all because of a man named Spartacus. Slavery is an institution for converting men into monkeys. Now, slavery played a huge role in Rome, and I mean huge, although most slaves were accountants, physicians, and prostitutes. Many of them had different roles. For example, if a slave was unskilled or punished, their consequences would be working on the farms, mines, and mills. What a life! Slaves were considered property under the Roman law, with no personhood behind the slaves. Compared to the Roman citizens, they could have faced corporal punishment. Slaves fed the Roman society, which ended up with more land being more conquered. Now, this helped recruit more slaves into the Roman land. Rome forced slaves to do the heavy work on a daily basis, but the nation wanted something new, something that would entertain their people. So they created a fighter-death sport titled the Gladiatorial Games. This deadly sport was an opportunity for the emperors and aristocrats to display their wealth and strength. In order to keep these games entertaining, they would train men so that the battles would last longer. But these aren't the Roman citizens we are talking about. These are slaves we are talking about. It was the slaves that competed in these games. These slaves gave their lives just to please a crowd. I repeat that again, just to please a crowd. It just shows how brutal the life conditions were for slavery in Rome. Although, there was one condition that could lead to freedom of a slave. However, if an individual continued to win multiple battles, they had the opportunity to seek freedom. This was what led to the revolt of the slavery, which we known as the Civil War. It was the first of the three large-scale slave revolts against the Roman Republic, but the last and most superior revolt was led by Spartacus himself. Not much known is known about Spartacus' earlier life. Spartacus was born in Thrace in 111 BC age. Spartacus was sent to Rome after being caught in the Roman army. According to some sources, he was leading bandit raids during his time in the army. Rome noticed Spartacus' activity was suspicious, so they went on and investigated. After being found guilty for the raids, Rome had signed him off for serving in the Roman army, and he was sold to a gladiator school located in Capua, where he became a slave. Spartacus was trained, yet he received very poor treatment from the school community. So one day, he had enough of the nonsense and plotted an escape alongside 70 other slaves. Firstly, Spartacus and his new recruit raided the kitchen. They threatened people with knives or attacked the guards if they engaged in combat. They seized the kitchen utensils to fight their way from the school, and also stole wagons of weapons and armour. The whole school was alerted about the escape, so they sent out soldiers to try to put a stop to the actions. But the slaves successfully defeated them with the help of the style of gladiatorial weapons. Now all that was left was for Spartacus and his new army of slaves to find a safe haven. So they went to Mount Vesuvius, where they would retire to a more defensible position. After the escape, the gladiators chose Spartacus and two Gallic slaves, Chrysis and Onemus, as their leaders. Although Rome had assumed that Spartacus and their escaped slaves were a homogeneous group. This is what led up to the Third Civil War. Spartacus, alongside his other 70 escaped slaves, spent 2 years training, aiming, and recruiting more slaves to join in on the infamous Spartacus revolt. Rome had dispatched military under the command of Gaius Claudius Claber, which besieged Spartacus. Rome was expecting a surrender from Spartacus and his army due to some starvation. Unfortunately for Rome, that never happened. Spartacus had used ropes from vines which helped climb down a cliffside of a volcano in order to attack a Roman camp, and the attack was a success, killing most of the civilians there. Attacks continued on, as one being a second expedition, which involved capturing the commander, executing guards, and stealing military equipment. Spartacus was on a roll with these attacks, which helped to recruit more slaves. Sources say that over 70,000 slaves joined the revolt after several successful attacks against Roman property. Now that is a ton of slaves for a darn revolt. Rome realized that Spartacus was an advanced tactician, which suggested that he had previous military experience. In 71 BC, Spartacus made a bargain with pirates to transport him and some of his slaves to Sicily, where Spartacus would initiate a slave revolt and gather reinforcements. Unfortunately, Spartacus was betrayed by these pirates, who took payment and then abandoned the rebels According to some sources, there were several attempts at raft and shipbuilding by the rebels in order to escape. This had been believed to be the first unsuccessful event carried out by Spartacus. And after that, things started going downhill. Eventually, Spartacus was defeated in 71 BC on the present territory of Cenotria near the bank of River Selle, where he was killed in action. In conclusion, Spartacus was not a rebel from what the Romans described him, but he was doing a heroic thing for those who were being controlled for several years. That's why people consider him as a hero, as he was fighting for freedom. Thank you.